A friend of mine recently sent me one of my old Minecraft server files that I created over 10 years ago. And I'm going to show you today what I wasted my time with during the past 10 years before I started getting serious with all the self-improvement stuff out there. But first, maybe let's have a look at the server files to convince you that the server is actually as old as I claim. As you can see here in this folder, there are lots of files that are from 2012. This is the last time the server was online. After that, it went to the archives and laid there for nearly 10 years. And the server originally was created a little bit earlier. We started playing Minecraft with some friends, well, around 2010, and most of the structures we had back then are still active. But well, Minecraft was only the fourth most played game I did back then. But let's now have a look at what I created on this server. The login might take some time. I want to wait until the world's fully rendered before we begin. Okay, but let's now have a look at what I have created. Okay. We are currently standing in the first structure that I created on this server, La Maison de Flow. It's just a small house that I used as my base of operations. There's nothing really special in there, and I'm currently playing on creative mode, with some bugged items in my pockets, since we used Industrial Crafts 2 back then, and some of the items are no longer available. Anyhow, let's have a look at the structures we first created in the very early ages of Minecraft. For example, this shabby little hut made out of some glass and some wood, where 4 of my friends and I were living. My friend Tim, my friend Florian, my other friend Harlot, and myself. Previously, even my brothers played on the same server. After that, we started creating a small fortress, which was also kind of interesting. And after that I got a bit more serious and started creating that telescope that you can see in the background. Please do not be surprised that all the structures here are actually hollow. That is just because our server file was corrupt at some point and we had to copy them to a new server to be able to keep them. Nevertheless, we played not on creative. We played in the regular Minecraft mode, and all the materials you see here were farmed. At the time of the creation of this structure here, there was no such thing as industrial craft. The mods all came later. However, we still farmed a lot of the leather and the paper for the bookshelves you see below, which was a real pain, as it took us quite some time to do so. And in the middle here, you'll see some nether portals and the telescope, the big one, which is where I lived in and was my Minecraft character for some time. After that, we changed a little and the community grew a little bigger, and we created lots of other things. For example, my brother created this Inca pyramid here, while I created things like this small military base, and another player on our server created this gym-like structure where players could pretend to play basketball, things like that. And in the background, there's our giant Bender statue from Futurama that is drinking a beer and having a lit cigar in his hands, which was also kind of neat. Okay. To the left, we can see a small village that is also on the server, and I honestly cannot remember who created it. It's not that impressive, but still a lot of time went into it. And as we can see here, all the structures on the entire server are connected via some road-like structure. And this road-like structure took me months to build. It's really a big project that spans probably tens of thousands of tiles. And after that, there is a rather big bridge that I and some friends created. Most of the time I created the bigger structures because most of the people weren't as patient as I was back in the days. And this bridge is really long, therefore we first will have a look at the blimp to our left with the vulgar speech on the sides. We were pretty young. Now Nevertheless, I find this structure here maybe not the biggest on the server, but one of the most impressive ones, because it consists of red wool. And red wool was not something that you could farm like you can do nowadays. That was a time when you still couldn't breed animals, therefore you had to kill sheep, and before you kill them you had to color them red. Otherwise they wouldn't yield red wool. Therefore this blimp consists of maybe 2,000 killed sheep, for which we had to collect the red flowers to create the ink to color them before. But nonetheless, let's stick to the bridge-like structure. By the way, all the structures are more or less hollow, and there are always some beds inside of the structure. And the bridge is pretty damn long, and was one of the biggest first structures we created on the server. But anyhow, let's now have a look at this hotel here, that also a friend of mine created. It's not from me, and apparently it's a real-world hotel that I cannot remember or find where it comes from. And behind that is our train station, which is a giant structure for the time it was created. And it's a pretty impressive one. The basement isn't finished yet, or isn't fully finished yet, but the outer structure is finished, and I was quite impressed that other people, other than me, created some very big structures on the server. And if we follow those roads here for, again, some time, we come to the favorite part of the map, where I spent most of my days. To the front we see a tower that is made of iron and gold and diamonds, and maybe some glowstone, where I stored my rare materials. And here is the main part of the map, my floating island structures, where I created lots of temple-like structures and big trees. And of course my ivory tower of decadency, where all my precious metals have been stored. And most of the trees are actually, well, you can actually go up and in there, and there will always be some beds and some place you can actually spend the night in case of some creeper attacks. Okay. Let's maybe remove this and continue. Here there is the entrance to my mines, where I found most of the materials, and I created a dragon head to make it more dramatic to enter there. To the left there is another big floating island, and in the middle there is my farm, where I found all the grains and stuff for the building projects. And here is the main part of the island. Or, well, let's maybe have a look at the other island first. Another big tree, another temple, and another well with a lot of water. And behind that is a relatively big floating ship that I also created. And you have to remember that all those structures have been created at a time where the materials weren't as easy to farm as they are nowadays. So everything here took countless hours. Especially the big tower structure that isn't really fully loaded in the background, but more on that later. That is my probably biggest project that will soon fully load, but we will see. Here is another well and another temple, and all the islands, for example, are hollow on the inside, because farming any more dirt would be a very tedious task. So I didn't do that, but planted lots of trees inside of this island and placed some animals and some torches everywhere. Okay, oops. Okay, but that's obviously not all. Here is where I stored all my riches and cataloged them. Some wooden structures, some seedlings, lots of food, mushrooms and the like, and many other things that I collected over the time that I played on the server. And concerning structures like this clay windmill, those have been far more difficult to farm than they are now, because clay was incredibly rare at that time. Most of the clay spawns were actually bugged, so you had to travel half of the map to find maybe 6 clay blocks and created something big out of them. And here's my floating castle that I also created. And remember, wool was incredibly rare, and you couldn't just find it, you had to kill the sheep for it, which was a real pain. And here is, for example, a mage tower that I also created a little bit later. And here is a rather big tree that I created from wood, but apparently all the chunks pretty much get despawned right now. And this tree is totally climbable. Oops. And it's also one of the things that took a pretty long time to build. And down there is more farm area. Well, where I found wood and watermelons and grains, and also some pens for all the sheep and other animals. And I guess I should maybe reconnect. Oh no, other structures in the background are correctly loading. Okay. Here's also one of the more big projects I created. On the sign here it says built by Flau, his greatest work. That isn't true anymore. The structure to the left is actually a little bit bigger, and we will visit the insides of that tower soon. But first let's have a look at what we have here. It's actually a giant Taj Mahal structure with a giant throne room in the middle. And of course you can visit the insides of all of this. Okay, let's maybe reset the time so we can see better. And we can actually enter, for example, this structure here. And there are all kinds of bookshelves. And the bookshelves were, as mentioned, a real pain to farm, because you had to kill so many sheep, so many cows for the leather, so many sugar canes for the paper had to be farmed. Well, the sugar canes were actually the easier part. Easier part. And here we have the entrance to the big tower. It's actually inspired by Karazhan from World of Warcraft. And we can actually enter this tower and see all the boss rooms that I recreated in here. Again, this is 8 years old, so it's probably not as refined as you think most things are nowadays. But we can enter here, and this were a room where you fought the horse boss, for example, in World of Warcraft. And if you move up the turret, or the tower, you will see all the other rooms. We have missed the basement or the cellar. For example, here you had to fight the boss Morose. And if you follow the path a little longer, you will enter a really big theater-like room where you had to kill the theater boss, one of 3 possible boss fights that could happen here. I have chosen the Little Red Riding Hood scenery to create here. And if we go a little bit further, we will notice a lot of other rooms that some of you might recognize that have played World of Warcraft at that time. Now we are heading to the upper part of the Karazhan Tower. For example, here there is a side entrance, for example, with lots of polar bears. I can't remember why they are there. But here is the side entrance. Here it is. You could actually skip whole parts of the dungeon, and here you could fight the boss Nightbane next to the roof of the theater. I had to do quite some research to get all the things right, and even then most of the rooms were completely out of proportion, so I had to get creative by recreating them. And here we have the room where we could fight the Curator, which is also a minion in Hearthstone right now. And if we enter here, we had to climb the whole tower to get to the other boss fights of the Karazhan Tower. For example, Medivh and some other boss creatures were here. I created this tower a little bit later, as the height limit in Minecraft has been increased after a few years, and well, it's probably back in the past by now. But here you had to fight one of the Satyr bosses. It was an extra, it wasn't necessary to kill it. Nonetheless, it was interesting, and I created the room you could fight that boss in. And if you continue to go the tower upwards, you encounter the several rooms that were on the path. For example, chunks aren't loading properly, but this is a room where you had to fight Medivh, or the father of Medivh, some ghost in World of Warcraft. And if we go up even further, we will see lots of other rooms that were in the original World of Warcraft Karazhan instance. For example, the observatory room, or the telescope room, or whatever it is called. There was another dragon-like boss you could fight here, with lots of portals and things you had to stay and raise and something like that. And if you go further to the roof, for example, there are obviously some skeleton horses that you can ignore that I try to spawn here. And then there's a chess boss room. And after that comes lots of other rooms where Medivh was supposedly sleeping in World of Warcraft. But here are parts of the tower that are completely unused because I had no idea what to put there. They were obviously there because the geometry of the tower demanded them, but there is nothing that actually was there during the World of Warcraft series. And here is the complete top of the tower. And obviously it had to have a top, but here you were fighting Malchezaar, the demon lord, if I remember correctly. And this is the very top of the tower. I placed some cake here and the roof of some other things. And here we can see the whole of the map below us, with the floating castles, the giant trees in the background here, and the floating island complex. And all in all the structures that you can see here took me tens of thousands of hours to create, to be honest. Okay, but I think that's about it, and we can now come to a short summary for today. So, as you can see here, I have really wasted an awful lot of time in games like Minecraft. In World of Warcraft alone, I spent about 550 hours of in-game time. I was pretty good back then, but it was nonetheless a huge waste of time. I don't have much remorse about the time I spent there because I obviously chose the right thing to do and focused on my university and other things, and things obviously worked out, but it was quite some time that has been wasted on all those projects here. Nonetheless, it's never too late to change. I started changing at the age of 23, let's say, or 22 maybe, and everything changed for the better. Nonetheless, that's about it for today. Thank you very much for watching. If you enjoy this kind of content, feel free to leave me a thumbs up and maybe subscribe to the YouTube channel. And if you feel like you want to comment on what I did on the Minecraft server, feel free to let me know in the comment section. But until then, I wish you a pleasant day and goodbye.